My girlfriend admitted she cheated. I needed a real man. She smirked. My friends took her side. I just smiled, took my keys and left. This morning, my phone blew up with 32 missed calls. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs through the last few months of our relationship. But when you've been with someone for 3 years, you tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It started with small things. Allison began working late more often, which wasn't unusual during busy seasons. But then came the new perfume I didn't recognize, clothes I'd never seen before appearing in our closet, and her phone suddenly becoming this sacred object that was never more than an arm's length away. I'm not the jealous type. Never have been. But something felt off. The way she'd pull away when I tried to hug her from behind while she was texting. How she'd step out to take calls, claiming they were work-related. The constant girls' nights with people whose names I'd never heard before. Last Tuesday, I was folding laundry when her phone lit up on the coffee table. A message preview from someone named Jay popped up. Miss you already. Last night was... The rest was cut off, but my stomach dropped. I didn't want to be that guy who snoops through his girlfriend's phone, but the universe seemed to be screaming at me to wake up. When she got home that night, I decided to be direct. She was in the kitchen, making herself a smoothie like nothing was wrong. The sound of the blender filled our apartment as I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. Who's Jay? I asked when she finally turned it off. The change in her posture was instant. Her shoulders tensed, but then she did something I wasn't expecting. She smiled. Not her usual warm smile, but something cold and almost triumphant. Wondering when you'd finally catch on, Michael, she said, taking a sip from her glass. Jay's my boss. And yes, I've been sleeping with him for the past 2 months. The casual way she said it felt like a slap. No guilt, no shame, just pride? I needed a real man, she continued smirking. Someone who knows what he wants and goes for it. Not someone who spends his weekends playing video games with Jacob and watching stupid movies. I stood there, processing her words. 3 years together, and this was how she really saw me. Through the shock, I felt something else rising. Not anger, but a strange sense of clarity. Does Chloe know? I asked, thinking of our mutual friend who'd introduced us. Oh, she's known for weeks. Allison laughed. Most of our friends know. They understand. Jay can actually provide a future, not just dreams and excuses. That hit harder than the cheating admission. These people we'd shared birthdays, holidays, and countless dinners with, they'd all been watching this happen, probably laughing behind my back. I pulled out my phone and opened my group chat with Jacob and Chloe. Is this true? You all knew? Jacob's response came quickly. Bro, you're great, but Allison deserves someone more established. Don't take it personally. Chloe chimed in. We didn't want to hurt you. But maybe this is the wake-up call you need. I looked up from my phone to find Allison watching me, that same smirk still playing on her lips. She was waiting for the explosion, the drama, the scene she could tell everyone about later. Poor immature Michael losing his cool. Instead I smiled. A real genuine smile that seemed to catch her off guard. Without a word I walked to our bedroom, pulled out my go bag, always kept one packed for weekend trips, grabbed my laptop, and my keys. When I passed through the kitchen again, Allison was staring, her smirk faltering slightly. Where are you going? She demanded. Out, I replied simply. And Allison, keep the apartment. I'm sure Jay can help with the rent. I heard her start to say something as I closed the door behind me, but I didn't stop to listen. My phone was already buzzing with messages, probably from our so-called friends trying to explain themselves. As I drove away I turned my phone off and felt something I didn't expect. Relief. Sometimes losing everything shows you exactly what you never had in the first place. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in months I felt like I was heading in the right direction. Update. First, thanks for all the support on my last post. Never expected it to blow up like that. A lot has happened in the past week, and honestly, I'm still processing everything. I've been staying at this small motel on the outskirts of town. Not the most glamorous place, but it's clean, and the owner, an older guy who introduced himself as Pete, seems decent. He even knocked $20 off the weekly rate when he heard my story. Turned my phone back on after 2 days of silence. 32 missed calls, 47 text messages. Most from Allison, some from Jacob and Chloe, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. But what really caught my attention was the notification storm from social media. Allison had been busy. Really busy. Her Instagram story painted a picture I recognized. Apparently, I was a controlling, jealous boyfriend who monitored her every move. According to her posts, I emotionally manipulated her for years, isolated her from friends, and threw a violent tantrum when she finally stood up for herself. Each post had hundreds of sympathetic comments, including ones from people I thought were my friends. The crown jewel, a tearful video where she claimed I had financially abused her by making her split all our bills 50/50 while I hoarded my money. Rich, considering she earned more than me and insisted on that arrangement herself. Then came the text from Gemma, a co-worker I've known for years. Hey, you might want to check your email. Something's going around the office about you. Sure enough, there was a company-wide email about creating a safe workplace environment, with a thinly veiled reference to recent concerning behaviors from certain employees. No names mentioned, but the timing wasn't subtle. I should have been angry. Maybe I should have fought back, posted my side of the story. Instead, I just felt curious. How far would she take this? Pretty far, as it turns out. Yesterday, I stopped by our local coffee shop, the one place I figured would be safe since Allison hated their coffee. Wrong. The barista, who'd always been friendly, gave me this look like I was something stuck to her shoe. Later found out Allison had become a regular there, sharing her survival story with anyone who'd listen. But here's where it gets interesting. While picking up some clothes from storage, I ran into Juliana, Allison's supposed best friend. She looked nervous, glancing around like she was afraid of being seen talking to me. You need to be careful, she whispered. Jay isn't just her boss, his wife, she's connected. Like, really connected. And Allison's been telling her you're unstable, dangerous even. Why are you telling me this? Juliana's eyes darted around again. Because this isn't the first time. Before you, there was another guy at work. Allison and Jay, they did the same thing to him. He ended up leaving town. That conversation changed everything. I spent the night digging, legal records, social media, anything I could find. Turns out the previous guy existed. Mark something. Disappeared completely from social media around the time Allison started at the company. This morning, I got a call from our landlord. Allison tried to remove my name from the lease, claiming I'd abandoned the property. When that didn't work, she told him I'd been threatening her. He called to warn me. Turned out his sister went through something similar years ago. But here's the real kicker. While all this was happening, I got a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was of a woman in her 40s, elegant, wearing expensive jewelry. The message was simple. I believe we need to talk about my husband and your girlfriend. Coffee tomorrow? It was signed Mrs. J. I'm meeting her in an hour. Something tells me Allison's real man story is about to get a lot more complicated. The funny thing is, watching Allison spin this elaborate web of lies, seeing our friends choose sides based on nothing but her word, it's actually liberating. Every nasty post, every fake tear, every manipulated story just confirms what I already knew. I'm not losing anything worth keeping. Update 2. Sorry for the delayed update. These past 2 weeks have been wild. That coffee meeting with Mrs. J, game changer. Turns out she's been gathering evidence for months, not just about Allison and her husband, but about a whole pattern of behavior at the company. Remember how Juliana mentioned the guy who left town? He wasn't the first. Mrs. J had documented at least 3 similar situations over the past 5 years. Young employees getting involved with her husband, then helping to push out anyone who might expose them. The difference this time? Mrs. J was done playing quiet. She had texts, emails, expense reports, even security footage from the company parking garage. But she wanted one final piece: public exposure. That's where the annual company party came in. I wasn't planning to attend. Why would I? But Mrs. J had other ideas. Sometimes, she told me, the best revenge is just letting people show their true colors. The party was at this fancy hotel downtown. I arrived late, dressed better than I ever had for these things. The looks when I walked in, priceless. Allison nearly dropped her drink. Jay's face went from red to white so fast I thought he might pass out. But here's the beautiful part. I didn't have to do anything. Chloe approached first, clearly tipsy. You've got some nerve showing up here, she slurred, loud enough for nearby groups to hear. After everything you put Allison through? I just smiled. Everything I put her through. That's interesting. Tell me more. That's when Gemma stepped in. Remember her? My coworker? Turns out she'd been quietly collecting her own evidence. Screenshots of Allison bragging about her conquest in company chat groups. Recordings of her planning how to spin the story with Jay. Actually, Gemma announced, I think we'd all like to hear the real story. The next hour was like watching dominoes fall. Mrs. J timing her entrance perfectly, tablet in hand. The projector that accidentally started playing a slideshow of incriminating messages and photos. Allison's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control of her narrative. But the real show came from Jacob. Good old bros before hoes, except when the hoe might advance my career. Jacob. He'd been filming everything on his phone, planning to show it to Jay later, prove his loyalty or something. Instead, he managed to capture Allison's complete meltdown. You think you're so clever, she screamed at me. You and that bitter old woman, trying to ruin everything I've built. Jay loves me. We're going to have a life together. That's when Mrs. J decided to share the cherry on top. Divorce papers, already filed. Turns out Jay had been promising Allison the same future he'd promised those other employees. Same script, different actress. The best part, through all of this I barely said a word. Just watched as years of manipulation and lies unraveled in real time. Juliana, who'd been quiet all evening, finally spoke up. I helped her, she admitted, addressing the now silent room. I helped her destroy that other guy's reputation. I can't do it again. By midnight, the party was effectively over. Allison had stormed out, mascara streaking down her face. Jay was locked in his office with HR. And those friends who'd been so quick to believe her stories. They couldn't look me in the eye. As I was leaving, Mrs. J caught my arm. Thank you, she said, for being the one who didn't run. I drove home to my motel room feeling strangely peaceful. Pete was still up, watching late-night TV in the office. He took one look at my face and grinned. Good night? You could say that. This morning, my phone's been blowing up again. Different tone this time. Apologies, explanations, people claiming they never really believed Allison's stories. Even got a message from Mark, the guy who left town. Apparently, he's been following everything through mutual connections. Sometimes karma doesn't need our help, it just needs an audience. Final update. Well, this is it. The final chapter of this saga, and trust me, it's been a hell of a ride. You might want to grab some popcorn for this one. First off, the aftermath of the company party hit harder than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, both Jay and Allison were asked to resign. But that was just the beginning. Remember those documents Mrs. J had collected? Turns out there was more. Much more. Every expense report Jay had falsified to cover his business dinners with Allison. Every email where they plotted against other employees. Every manipulated performance review. She handed it all to the board of directors. The company's legal team moved fast. Really fast. They were less concerned about the affairs and more worried about the pattern of workplace harassment and financial misconduct. Both Jay and Allison are now facing civil lawsuits. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember Mark, the guy who left town? He came back. And he brought receipts, literal and figurative. Turns out he'd documented everything before he left, including the smear campaign Allison and Jay ran against him. He just hadn't known what to do with it all. Until now. Mrs. J introduced him to her lawyer. 3 days later, he filed his own lawsuit. Then something beautiful happened. Other former employees started coming forward, each with their own stories, their own evidence. What started as one scandal quickly became an avalanche. Allison tried to get ahead of it. She posted a tearful video claiming she was the real victim, manipulated by Jay and now being persecuted. That's when Juliana finally grew a spine. She posted the screenshots of their private chats, the ones where Allison bragged about her conquests and planned how to destroy people's reputations. The ones where she mocked her victims. Last week, Allison showed up at my motel. Pete, the owner, called me at work. That girl you told me about. She's making a scene in the parking lot. I took my time driving back. Found her sitting on the hood of my car, mascara streaked, clutching a manila envelope. I have dirt on everyone, she said, trying to sound threatening despite her shaking voice. If you don't help me stop this, I'll release it all. I just laughed. Go ahead, burn every bridge you have left. See how that works out. She threw the envelope at me. Inside were photos, screenshots, private messages, ammunition she'd collected over years of manipulating people. Her insurance policy. I took pictures of every single page while she watched, then handed it back to her. Release whatever you want. But first, look at where your previous schemes got you. The thing about people like Allison. They can't stand when their weapons are turned against them. She tore up the envelope right there in the parking lot, screaming about how we'd all regret this. That tantrum? Someone recorded it. It was all over social media within hours. The final blow came yesterday. Mrs. J's divorce was finalized, and guess what? She got everything. The house, the cars, most of their assets, Jay's golden parachute from the company, gone to pay legal fees, his reputation, destroyed, his future career prospects. Let's just say Google is not his friend anymore. As for Allison, last I heard, she's moving back in with her parents in another state. Her social media's gone dark. Those friends who sided with her, they're dealing with their own fallout. Turns out backing the wrong horse has consequences. Jacob tried to apologize yesterday. Sent this long message about how he should have been a better friend. I just replied with a screenshot of his old messages supporting Allison. He blocked me. Coward. Chloe's doing damage control too. She's worried those screenshots Allison kept might affect her own career. I almost feel bad. Almost. Me? I just signed a lease on a new apartment. Got a promotion at work. Funny how removing toxic people improves everything. And yeah, I'm seeing someone new. Taking it slow. Doing it right. The best revenge isn't plotting or scheming. It's living well and letting people destroy themselves. But I won't lie, watching it all burn has been pretty satisfying. This will be my last update. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Reddit. Remember, karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes you just need to step back and let people show their true colors.